I'm Peter Austin, those are ghost words, and this is interesting. A dictionary is really quite an astounding undertaking when you really stop and think about it. The sheer hoard of information that has to be crammed between its covers is sort of mind-boggling, really, especially if it's one that's aiming to be totally comprehensive. It reminds me of that scene from Blackadder III, where Samuel Johnson, the writer of one of history's most influential English dictionaries, is fooled into adding several made-up words to his manuscript, such as contrafibularities. And as it happens, meaningless entries like that have actually found their way into a few real-life dictionaries. Not through the work of a prankster, but rather due to some somewhat amusing human error. So, spell checkers at the ready, everyone, as we take a look at some of the English language's most pericombobulating ghost words. Arguably the most famous of these spectral definitions is one that I've actually already used in this video. Most of you probably caught it, but dord, the sheer dord of information, though it sounds perfectly cromulent, is not actually the synonym for density that I made it out to be, though that didn't stop it appearing as such in a forerunner of the Merriam-Webster dictionary that many people rely on today. But first, some older examples. The term ghost word was first coined in 1886 by Walter William Skeat, president of the Philological Society, during a discussion on why the word abacot, a particular type of hat, had been intentionally omitted from the Oxford English Dictionary, which had just been published for the very first time. Apparently, its earlier erroneous inclusion in Webster's dictionary was due to, quote, a remarkable series of blunders and ignorant reproductions of error. Harsh words. You see, in the medieval period, when people played pretty fast and loose with spelling, the type of hat known as a bicocket with a Y was sometimes written bicocket with an I. Unfortunately, a typo in Edward Hall's 1548 Chronicle of English History turned a bicocket into abacocket. This then appeared in works by later chroniclers as abacock and then abacock before it finally stabilised as abacot, which was subsequently reproduced by a long line of early dictionary writers right up to the 19th century, including Webster's. Skeat gave us other examples as well. He tells us that in 1808, the Edinburgh Review, a journal that was rather ironically known partly for its literary criticism, stated that some Hindus run chimes through their hands. But despite being nothing more than a typographical error, the word chime was then picked up and reprinted elsewhere under the belief that it was some variety of Indian knife. Stranger still was his example of a case where contemporary academics were so taken in by a ghost word that they actually tried to work out what its etymology might be. In early editions of Sir Walter Scott's The Monastery, the phrase "dost thou so soon morse thoughts of slaughter" led to two independent etymological theories being sent into scholarly journal Notes and Queries. One cited the Old French amorce, the powder used to prime a cannon or musket, turning the sense of the quotation into "are you so quick to prime or prepare to ignite thoughts of slaughter?" But another contributor thought it might come from the Latin mordere, to bite, in the sense of "do you chew on or mull over thoughts of slaughter?" In reality, though, it was literally just a typo for "dost thou so soon nurse thoughts of slaughter?" as was discovered when Scott's original manuscript was checked. Skeat's examples ended there, but the phenomenon was of course far more widespread. For example, the long chain of typos over history that we saw with abacot turned out to also be behind a ghost collective noun for ferrets. Though more commonly known as a busyness of ferrets, a number of dictionaries once claimed that a gathering of such creatures could also be referred to as a theming or femming. As it turns out, though, this is simply the original word busyness being misprinted half a dozen times over several hundred years. Busyness to beziness, beziness to fezziness, fezziness to fezzing, and fezzing to theming. And it's carelessness like this that led to the insertion of our word dord into Webster's New International Dictionary of 1934. The story goes that the dictionary's chemistry editor, Austin Austin M. Patterson submitted a request to have the word density added to the list of terms that could be abbreviated by the letter D. His request was made in the usual fashion, using a special paper slip on which he'd written D or D continued density. You can probably see the problem here. The note was rather catastrophically misread as the ghost word dawed and then missed by proofreaders, and so for the next 5 years, Webster, precursor to the big Merriam-Webster brand we all know today, published dictionaries featuring an entry for dawed with the definition density. And it seems it wasn't just the headwords of entries that were at risk of this kind of corruption. In one particular 20th century edition of the Oxford English Dictionary, under the definition of the decidedly non-ghostly word glare, referring to a particularly smooth or reflective kind of ice, you'd find a usage example that stated, "The carebow then suddenly squats upon its haunches and slides along the glare ice." Rather worryingly, looking up the word carebow in that same dictionary would yield no entry at all. But a few pages later, you would find the word caribou, the actual animal that slid along the glare ice. That's quite the typo, isn't it? Even more technical reference books were sometimes home to ghost words. One has to imagine, for example, that the man behind Bode's rule of numerical integration was not pleased to see it featured in many mathematical textbooks of the 1970s and 80s, partly because he'd been dead for 100 years, so how could he be pleased, but mainly because his name was actually George Boole. Oh dear. God, anyone would think all of these writers and their proofreaders had been practicing esquivalence, or the willful avoidance of one's official responsibilities. But then again, maybe not, as despite appearing on dictionary.com with this definition, the word is in fact a copyright trap, a false term intentionally inserted into the 2005 second edition of the New Oxford American Dictionary to catch out other dictionaries that were copying information wholesale from this original source. And once you learn this, the definition takes on a whole new level of meaning. Now, strictly speaking, copyright traps like this aren't ghost words in and of themselves because they're known to be false when they're inserted into their source text, but arguably, another writer taking the bait and adding that word to their own work erroneously kind of does fit the ghost word definition, almost. I guess we sort of need a new label for this particular kind of phenomenon, a bit like how there is a word for the auditory equivalent of a ghost word. Mondegreens, as they're called, are usually phrases rather than individual words that take on an unintended meaning when misheard. They were so named by writer Sylvia Wright in 1954 when she described the concept in an essay in Harper's Magazine. She stated that her mother used to read her poems from Thomas Percy's 1765 book, Relics of Ancient English Poetry, including the ancient Scottish ballad, The Bonny Earl o' Moray, and as she remembered it, one of the verses of that poem went like this: "Ye highlands and ye lowlands, oh where have ye been? They have slain the Earl o' Moray and Lady Mondegreen." A tragic tale of two lovers dying together, it seems, until you check the source text and realise that, in fact, they have slain the Earl o' Moray and laid him on the green. Apparently, not only can you not trust your dictionary anymore, you can't even trust your ears. I've been Peter Austin, and that was intriguative.